Uh, the Need Tree. This was a short personal essay and a poem, a video poem cycle that was originally published in the magazine, the online journal Poetry Film Live. A memory. I'm with my brother during the summer. It's a Saturday morning. We're waiting by our family's old car, a second-hand Volkswagen that sits in the driveway, gathering heat like a tent that's been zipped up and set in the sun. There's a huge tree close to the car, an elm. All the neighborhood's elms are slowly dying of Dutch Elm disease. It's the sort of environmental crisis that people in Ottawa, our hometown, get concerned about. Terms like global warming are far off in the future. Fear of nuclear war, however, is not. My parents are deeply involved in the peace movement against the bomb, against Vietnam. My brother and I are bored. We've been told by our parents to, quote unquote, wait by the car. We're all going to the beach. My dad, however, has to make what he calls are just a few phone calls. Hardworking at his job as an architect and hardworking as an activist, he constantly seems busy. This is both a source of amusement and annoyance in our family. Every family outing seems to involve a wait time, made all the more drawn out and hard to endure by the summer heat. Not the heat itself, but the sense one has in the summer of time slowing, of time doubling, of tripling itself, like an ancient time machine. My brother and I look at the tree. We both have the same sense of its immensity, of its complex, messy beauty, its leaves like flattened neurons or flocks of gently undulating seaweed. The sun feels golden. The sun pours down on us, on the tree, on the car. My brother and I, not impatient enough yet to start quarreling, experience all this with a kind of peace. Then from within the house, the strange sound of an elevated voice, that sound that is the human equivalent of a bark. Parents like excitable dogs, one bark or a furious string of many. We don't even know if it's my dad's voice or my mom's. But the elevated voices continue until they flow into an angry conversational torrent. My brother and I look at each other and at the same time look away. Our parents are fighting. Weekends are eerily predictable. And so, from a beginning to an end, my sweet kid brother with me during the summer, my moody, obstreperous, exasperatingly stubborn, but still sweet brother, dying. How do events, the events of an entire life, come round to an end like this? It's not the sort of question you ask yourself directly. It's one that lurks at the back of your mind. It's hard to accept the reality of a loved one's death, especially when it all seems so tragically preventable. But my brother died. Addicts die all the time, and sometimes medical systems help. Often they do not. They stand back. And sometimes families help. Or sometimes families fracture or enable or simply crack under the pressure. Understanding the reality of this sort of death is hard, and understanding in any sort of helpful way its causes is also hard. There are many explanations for addiction, ranging from the one most modern people have got used to, that it is a disease and is caused by changes in the brain which drive the addict to crave his or her substance of choice with a physical ache, a physical need. One medical dictionary defines it as follows, quote, addiction is habitual psychological or physiological dependence on a substance or practice that is beyond voluntary control, end of quote. The Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, DSM-4, defines addiction as, quote, substance dependence is when an individual persists in the use of alcohol or other drugs despite problems related to the use of the substance. Substance dependence may be diagnosed. Compulsive and repetitive use may result in tolerance to the effect of the drug and withdrawal symptoms when use is reduced or stopped. This, along with substance abuse, are considered substance use disorders." End of quote. There have been a variety of counter-explanations ranging from the anti-psychiatry movements of the 1960s and 70s to the pop psychological theories of the 21st century, including Ken Nyman's argument that addiction is a quote-unquote difficult choice, to Mia Salavitz's argument that, quote, addiction is neither an illness nor a sign of an immoral personality, but a learning disorder, end of quote. And of course, there are family counseling models with many of their sources in psychoanalysis that see addiction as having roots in family dysfunction. It is this final aspect of addiction that is the hardest to make sense, or at least the thorniest in its complexity. What happened near the end was not simply that my brother drank, but that he seemed pursued by the furies of some mental anguish he was trying to self-medicate. And these were alongside the furies that seemed to block his perception of what he was doing to himself. To make matters even more difficult were the psychic furies of another family member who enabled, quite severely, my brother's isolation and constant imbibing of cheap booze. Yet who is responsible? That is the question a person must always come back to, and the answer is always the same. It's the addict. He or she is the one who is making certain choices. Then, that question answered, another question emerges, like a hydra head, like a rubber ball, like a kid's question: why did it happen? And here we return to the complicated matrix of family relationships, marriage relationships, doctor-patient relationships. And to answer, that is, understand these latter questions, one also becomes aware of the need for acutely accurate language. My brother, a very good poet, was also aware of the extreme nuance, almost the vibratingness of language. But language is rarely a refined tool. The explanations of therapists, of doctors, even friends, seem to deflate almost as soon as they are offered. In a sense, making art about something as personal as the death of a sibling is one of the few ways to quote-unquote talk about it. The very ambiguity of artistic language has its shortcomings, but these shortcomings are better than the frequently clumsy quality of empirical, self-consciously factual discourse. Moreover, apart from the writing, is the art that goes into a project like this. In the case of the pictures of my brother that are in these video poems, I did them in notebooks I carried with me. I didn't do them when we were together, but soon after. The lines in the background of many of the drawings are not really intentional. School notebooks are cheap, and that's why I use them. I could redo the drawings on better paper, but doing the drawings once has probably been, up to now, all I can bear. Grief still hits me very hard at times when I think about him, and maybe the unfinished quality of the drawings is a result of that sadness as much as it is an aesthetic preference I have for visual art that is representational but a little bit unfinished. Faced with an actual addict, and my brother wasn't the first self-destructive alcoholic I had met, explanations become quote-unquote explanations. Everything seems to wither away in the face of the sheer implacability of the addict's crazed, frustratingly stubborn behavior. And in our family, at least, it was certainly true that my brother's addiction seemed to have roots that went back decades. But then there was also the pain and dysfunction of his own marriage, along with the heavy drinking that was a part of that. Which root is the most important? Which disease is killing the tree?